And then we will turn. Our next speaker is going to be Mekkie Bansil. I hope I'm saying that last name right. If not, they can correct me. And a little bit about them. They're a 4-time SaaS startup marketer and designer, retired journalist, almost a real artist, already a real crazy cat lady. I have a lot to talk about crazy animal people. I too am a crazy person with my dogs. I have too many. But especially likes reading or reviews books on all subjects, but especially likes reading on design and startup life. So I'm very excited to see what Mekkie has to share with us today. And we'll turn the time over to them. They now have co-host ability, so you should be able to share your screen.
Hello, I'm actually going to turn off my virtual background because I have some props for this that won't show up if I use it. Okay, yes, I feel like I should have brought my cat to this presentation, but it's a little too late for that now. Okay, am I sharing my screen? Is this working?
Yes, you are.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So before I start to add on a little bit to that bio, why you should care about what I have to say, I'm the CEO at a startup called Nonfic. It's a tech product that reviews a lot of ebooks. And so when I say ebooks, I mean those, you know, where you go to a website and it's like, enter your email for the ultimate guide. How many people have done that before? Has anyone done that before? Okay.
No.
If you haven't done it, I would not recommend it. There's a 90% chance you're going to get something that's very disappointing. Sorry, what?
We're just all laughing. Go ahead.
Okay. That is actually why I created Nonfic, because we were reading all of these ebooks. Now I read like over 100 a week, probably. And I realized that there's just so many out there that are so bad, and it's a wasted opportunity to continue to educate professionals on topics that range all the way from like marketing to sales to engineering, that's being wasted on really bad content. So we came up with, this is Nonfic, we have this little character, and we came up with this rating system. We said, how can people create, how can thought leaders write books, create content that is really educational and helps the readers learn when they can't be there in video or classrooms or teaching? And we came up with this 3-point rating system, which is based on value, readability, and actionability. So we grade all of our books on this scale, and I'll talk a little bit about why this book did so poorly later in this talk. And then we also give all of the books a composite score based on those 3, in addition to some other things. So today I'm going to talk about how all of you can create OER content, books especially, that optimize for these 3 points. And I'm going to do that with a dollar bill, which we all thought was useless now, but isn't, because you can use it for this. I was actually going to use a $20 bill and make an inflation joke, but then I went grocery shopping. So anyway, first up, how can you use a dollar bill to make an ebook more valuable? At Nonfic, we define value primarily based on if the ebook delivers on the original promise. So a lot of the times you'll see a marketing website, it's like, enter your email for the ultimate guide, the last guide you'll ever need on how to buy the perfect cat toy. I read all those books. My cat is still unhappy. He still wants the box. They should have just put a box in that book and I would have been happier with it. So lots of pitches that don't align to the final message, very disappointing. And then also we think about, as we're reading these books, is this book worth the time it takes to read it? So I think that second point is a little bit more applicable to OER content. And one thing that, as we write our own ebook, we're actually working on our own ebook right now, I'm realizing is writers lose track of the overall message as they're writing. That happens a lot. And one way to avoid that is with really good outlining. Now, I'm sure all of you guys know how to write a good outline. You've all created stuff before. You know what makes a good outline and bad outline. You know outlines are important. But one thing that you may or may not know is for an outline to be good before you start writing a book, it needs to be actually quite a bit more detailed than you probably thought. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second here. so that I can move this over here. Oh, actually, how this works. Okay, so I can use my props here. So this is a InDesign book that somebody gave me in 2019. That's actually not that good. Do I would not recommend reading it. So what you want to do is you want to take your dollar bill, and of course this is just a rule of thumb because it varies based on your font size and your page size and whatnot. But for every 1 point on here, actually you want to hold it this way. You want to make sure that you have at least this much in your outline before you start writing your book. So this is kind of a rule of thumb that I use. I actually just put it right up on my screen, and I do not start writing a chapter or a section until I have this much in my outline. So the reason for this is because a lot of times you will create an outline with the best of intentions, and you will start writing, and then you will forget what that section was actually about. And then you will end up somewhere completely different on a tangent, probably like I'm about to do now. So I'm going to move on to the next point before I tangent onto a different thing. So screen sharing again. So next up, we grade ebooks on actionability. So this one's a little bit more straightforward. When we're thinking about actionability for free content on Nonfic, we think about, is there practical how-to advice? Are there step-by-step instructions? We love worksheets, exercises. I really like ripping things out, cutting it up, doing things with it. You can do things digitally a lot. Can I leave comments? Are there questions? Is the book keeping me engaged as I go through it and read it? So once again, I'm going to do this again. So this is looking at the table of contents. Again, you want to make sure that there is enough action throughout your table of contents. So take your dollar bill again. Hope everyone actually has one of these days. Do I need to stop screen sharing to do this, or can I just leave it up?
You can just leave it up. We can see your.
You can see me. Okay, cool. So you want to take the book, and on your table of contents, you want to hold it this way. So hold it short ways. And again, this varies by font. And you want to make sure that for every length, width, whatever of this dollar bill, there is at least 2 actionable activities. This does not mean something like, here's a suggestion for how you could apply this, or here's some theory about how this was applied. Or one thing we see a lot, here's a case study for how we did this really well. No, that is not actionable content. Actionable content is stuff where the reader can specifically within the book or on a separate sheet of paper or on their laptop can actually take action on the content. So you want to make sure for every length of this on your table of contents, you have at least 2 of those. Again, just a rule of thumb. So that is how you make your content actionable. Now, last one. This is my favorite one, and also the one that caused me the greatest pain. I have a design background and a journalism background, and this one comes straight from both of those. A lot of the ebooks that are created, and I think this is something that is specifically applicable to OER when you're kind of creating ebooks, you don't necessarily understand design and typography and things, is it readable? So I try to detach myself from this a little bit. The question is not, is it beautiful? Difficult for me personally, but is it readable? And the things that really play into readability are things like, does it have a detailed table of contents? Can a reader skim to find the information they need? And is it designed in a way that's at least visually appealing enough that whoever is reading the book can absorb the content? So, and also, is it accessible? I'm going to use actually this Intercom ebook, which was the one that you saw at the beginning. I have a hard copy of it. One thing that you don't want to do before I get into the actual how to use a dollar bill is you do not under any circumstances ever want to try to do something super fancy and end up with orange text and a white background like this. Please, please do not ever do this. I don't care how cool it looks. I don't care how good it is for whatever your personal brand. Please don't do this. It makes me really sad because this is actually a very valuable and actionable book that's written by Intercom. but I couldn't do anything with it because I couldn't read it. I don't know what just happened there. My screen just flashed. Okay, now that I'm done with that little soapbox, this is the original dollar bill rule. So back when I was in journalism school and I was doing journalism, I took a layout rotation. This was something that everyone kind of circulated around, and I don't know if anyone else knows this, but what you do is anytime you're laying out a page, so you have any page here, you take a dollar bill, and we would actually pull dollar bills out of our pockets, and you put it anywhere on the page. If you put it here, you put it here, you attach it to a pencil, and you just spin it around in the center. It really doesn't matter. You need to make sure that both edges of the bill, all the edges, touch a graphical element. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. Obviously a picture is a graphical element. Pull quotes like this can be a graphical element. Header text that hopefully is not orange in your version is also a graphical element. And the reason for that is because as people are reading things, they need to pause in their mind. Like they need a place where they can pause and absorb the information that they've just read. And graphics and images give them a way to do that subconsciously. It also gives them a point of reference so that if they need to come back to that section later, they can be like, oh yeah, it was the part with the picture of this thing. And then they can quickly skim the book and find what they were looking for and then relearn that knowledge and solidify it more when they need to later. So that is actually the original dollar bill rule. Please, no orange text. And it's a little meme that I put together to illustrate the dollar bill rule graphically. And just a last kind of tip about ebook design. I know a lot of you are probably coming to this from a little bit more of a low tech perspective, don't necessarily need design tools like InDesign or Affinity Designer. Those are of course what I use, but I've actually created quite a few really good ebooks in Apple Pages. It's free if you have a Mac. It comes with the computer. The learning curve is not that bad. You can put pictures in. There's great templates to start with. They use really good design principles in their templates. And then also Canva, not Canvas, I have never used it personally to design an ebook, but I know a lot of people really like it. And don't be afraid to use a Google Doc or even, God forbid, Microsoft Word. As long as you use lots of headers and put graphics where necessary. Once again, it doesn't have to be beautiful to be usable. And last but not least, if you guys want to see examples of ebooks that we think are really good at Nonfic, come over, visit us. You can leave comments. You can set your own privacy things. And also you can hang out with our good friend, Bookmark, who dreams of better ebooks.
All right, thank you. Do we have any comments in the chat?
Okay, I'm just reading through these questions. Sorry, I didn't see these as I was going through. Yeah, so accessibility, we definitely do look at that. It plays into the design element. If font sizes are too small, or once again, I don't want to go back on the orange text rant, but readability and accessibility and the ability to absorb the information after reading the book is the most important thing when we look at the ebooks. And there's a lot of good guidelines for, this is, I think, answering Kelly's question, but let me know if I should elaborate a little bit more. You can read a lot of really good typography guidelines just on, like Google has their material design guidelines, or there's a book I really like called Thinking with Type that goes very in depth into layout and like print layout, digital layout, baseline grids, maybe a little bit more than anyone needs. But really speaking, the only thing that the main things that matter are, is the text broken up into sections, subsections? So going back to your outline, your table of contents, and also is the font size big enough that even visually impaired people can read it? Those are the things that you really want to focus on. And as long as you keep all of those in mind, you should be okay. Okay, Danielle says, what would be the dollar bill rule of thumb for an e-text when you were scrolling top to bottom and all have different screen sizes? Okay, so I think Danielle, if you could clarify, but I think what you're asking is that if you have, like, if you're on an iPad, how do you apply the dollar bill rule to an iPad? Was that the question?
Thank you for this. This was really great. I've started to put readability into all of my writing classes. So this is right up in my recent alley. Anyway, no, and also I think that many of us, so I'm designing OER materials through my library. We have to use Pressbooks. Pressbooks happens to have a format, so I choose a format and I can't adjust the font. I can't adjust certain aspects. And so what we're trying to decide is, and I guess this is more of a human issue, do you prefer to have the little tab on the side be really, really, really small and know that you have to scroll through a ton of content? Or should we be having that little scroll bar be big so it seems like there's less content and it's more readable, but the content is actually embedded into different pages instead of this really, 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 really long scrolling format. And then the dollar bill rule of thumb being how much of that text, then, like if I put a dollar bill on my screen, the dollar bill on someone else's screen is going to be really different. And so it's sort of like, I guess it's more of a global question in terms of lines of text, or, you know, before there's a graphic or before there's an actionable item, that there'd be like 12 lines of text, or there'll be 25 lines of text or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on that, or anyone else here? Just because the Pressbooks has been driving me nuts from that point of view, that I can't adjust many of these things that I want to adjust.
Right. So I haven't actually used Pressbooks myself per se, but to address like the screen size issue, I think that you want to think about it from a piece of paper perspective. So if you were on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and you had like 12-point fonts, just somehow get your screen as close to that as possible, and then you can use the dollar bill rule on it. So it's really just for that. And then whoever is reading it, it's not so much that they need to have the dollar bill experience. It's more just so you're making sure that that you're pacing the book appropriately. In terms of the long scrolling thing, I would say it's difficult because you don't want to overwhelm readers with like, oh my God, there's so much content here. But we find, as we read a lot of ebooks, and also we hear on user interviews quite a bit, the disconnect between the original, like what is originally promised, and what happens at the end. If there's a disconnect there, that's so much worse for both learning and experience than maybe being a little bit overwhelmed up front. So I don't know if Pressbooks gives you the option to put an automatic table of contents at the beginning, or some kind of like a linkable, like Google Docs does. But I would say just being super upfront with the table of contents and making sure that you have a really detailed table of contents is the best way to approach that usability problem.
Super. Thank you so much. Enjoyed that. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Katie said, thank you so much for the presenters. I'll check back for the recording. Okay, good luck with your final exam, Katie. And Kelly said, color is important too. Red-green color blindness is more prevalent among some populations than others, especially some minorities. So even apart from aesthetic concerns, which I agree about orange text and a white background being difficult to read, using red to make something salient can actually de-emphasize it for colorblind readers, and POC are more likely to experience that. Yeah, so I completely agree with this statement. Color is obviously a good way to indicate something in a text. Red and green are both very difficult colors. One thing that you always want to do is you want to check any color usage against an accessibility checker that you can switch it so you can see how things look to red-green colorblind people. You can see, you can check the contrast numbers, make sure it has high enough contrast. The font size is big enough so visually impaired people can also absorb it. And when possible, depending on the software that you're using, you also want to make sure that you have screen reading abilities. So anyone that cannot see the book can listen to it. This is built into a lot of browsers these days, but occasionally you'll have to set your book so that it'll allow it to do that. And a quick Google will give you lots of tools that show you how to do that. But yes, red-green color blindness is something that when you're designing your book, you want to be very aware of. And also I saw, so just a side note, I saw a really funny meme the other day, and it was a black and white. So the textbook had been printed in black and white, and it was about I think it was teaching Indonesian, if I remember correctly. So it has colored boxes, says, please learn the colors in Indonesian, but they were just all gray. And then they had the color names underneath it. And so I think this is a really great example of understanding the context in which you're going to be using your educational materials. And as long as you keep that context in mind, it will help you optimize for readability for many different groups of people.
All right, thank you once again. We are going to turn over to our penultimate presentation for today.